Hey everyone, I know I have been gone for a little while. Life got a little busy and then unfortunately I got sick, so between everything that was happening and just not feeling well, I really did not have the time or energy to sit down and make a video. And honestly, once you take a break from YouTube for a little bit, it becomes very easy to keep disappearing. You tell yourself, I'll record next week, and then next week becomes the week after, and then suddenly you're sitting there thinking, okay, I really need to make a video. So here I am. And while I was away, I was still thinking about some of the conversations that happened under my previous videos, especially the comments I saw whenever people were talking about a couple separating. It was always something like, oh, please stay together for your daughter. Kids need both parents. At least try to work things out. And I actually understand why people say these things. If you hear that a couple is separating and there is a child involved, your immediate reaction is going to be, okay, but what about the child? And that's a completely fair question. But then I started thinking about something else. Why do we automatically assume that the answer to protecting a child is for the parents to stay together? And more importantly, why do we, as complete strangers, sometimes feel like we know enough about somebody else's marriage to tell them whether they should stay together or not? Because if you think about it, this is a pretty strange level of confidence to have about a relationship that you don't actually know. So that's what I want to talk about today. Let's start with something very simple. Go to the comment section of almost any video where a couple announces a separation or a divorce, especially if they have been online for years. You will see a lot of people saying, please don't separate, don't give up on your marriage, you two were so happy together, please work things out. And then you will see other people saying stuff like, marriage mein sacrifices to karne hi padte hain, every couple goes through difficult phases, don't let one bad situation destroy the family. And then you will see people become incredibly emotional. They are crying, they're talking about how they have watched this couple from the beginning, how they feel heartbroken. And honestly, I get all of these comments. If you have watched somebody for years, and if they have been part of your daily routine, obviously their life is going to feel very familiar to you. You're going to have an emotional reaction when something changes. That's very normal. But I think there is a point where we need to separate having feelings about something from having the authority to decide something. We need to remember that just because we care about something doesn't mean we get to decide what happens. You can be sad about something. You can be disappointed. You can say, yeah, I don't like this situation. You can even say, I really hope they work things out. But that is very different from saying you need to stay married. Because now you're not just expressing how you feel, you're making a decision about somebody else's life. And the funny thing is, we would probably recognize how strange and fucked up this sounds in almost any other situation. Imagine your neighbor auntie telling you, I think you should leave your husband. He's not good for you. And you're like, okay, auntie, but you don't actually know what our relationship is like. And she's like, what do you mean? I've seen you guys together for years. You're always fighting. I see the way you talk to each other. And you'd probably think, yeah, but you don't live with us. You don't know what happens when the door closes. You don't know the conversations we have. You don't know what we have been through together. You don't know the good parts you don't get to see. You don't know how many times we have worked through things. You might have an opinion based on what you have seen, and that's completely fair, but you don't have the full picture. Basically, you don't know shit. So in that situation, you would not expect that neighbor auntie to know your marriage well enough to tell you what you should do with it. And even if she somehow thought she did, you'd probably tell her to mind her own business. And yet, put that same relationship on YouTube, and suddenly millions of people will feel like they know enough to tell two strangers what they should do with their marriage. And I think social media makes this incredibly easy because it has given us access to so much of people's life. And because we have access, we start feeling like we know everything. You can have access to someone's life without actually knowing their life. And relationships are probably one of the easiest things to misunderstand when you're looking at them from the outside. You can look at a couple and think, they look so happy together. Maybe they are not. You can see them fighting and think, wow, they're always fighting. Maybe they are. Maybe you have just seen one of the 3 arguments they have in the entire year. You see them laughing together and think, they have such an amazing marriage, but you don't know what happens when the cameras are off. Because the reality is, nobody puts 100% of their life online. What we see is one version of their reality, the part they have chosen to share with you. And there is nothing wrong with that. That is what content creation is. You choose what you share, what stays private, and what gets edited out. Imagine a couple who vlogs every day. They have been fighting for most of the day. They're frustrated and not even speaking to each other. Eventually, in the evening, they sit down and work things out. Now they make a 15-minute vlog about that day. Are you expecting to see all the 24 hours? Of course not. maybe we see 1 or 2 minutes of that argument. But in most of the vlog, you will see them laughing, spending time together, having some cute moments with their kids, and happily ending the night. From our perspective, it might look like, wow, they have such a great relationship. But that is not necessarily what happened. They lived 24 hours together, and we watched 15 minutes of it. And even those 15 minutes were edited. And that is the difference. We experience their life as content, but for them, this is their life. And I think this is something that we need to remember. Now, this is where the idea of a parasocial relationship comes in. A parasocial relationship is basically a one-sided relationship where a viewer invests time, care, and emotional energy into a media figure, a celebrity, an influencer, or a fictional character who does not even know they exist. And when people hear the word parasocial relationship, they immediately assume, oh, they're talking about someone who is extremely obsessed with an internet personality, or a celebrity, or an actor. Somebody who knows the celebrity's blood type and is waiting outside their home. Somebody who's very stalker-like. But it doesn't have to be that extreme to be a parasocial relationship. Imagine you have been watching the same creator every week for, let's say, 5 years. You know their personality. You know their sense of humor. You know their morning routine. You know what they order at Starbucks. They're telling you about their day, their family, their problems, their achievements. And then the influencer couple makes it even more complicated because now you're not just watching one person, you're watching a family grow. You're watching the first date, the proposal, the wedding, the pregnancy announcement, the birth of their first child, birthdays, vacations, anniversaries, buying a house, celebrating festivals. And after a few years of watching all of this, it can genuinely start to feel like you are watching people you have known for years. Especially when the creator is saying, hi guys, or hi family, come shopping with me, tell me which dress should I wear for my birthday, let's go have dinner. Basically, they are letting you into parts of their life. So after 5 years, your brain has accumulated enough information to make you believe, okay, I know this person. And in a weird way, you do. You know a lot of things about them. But that is very different from knowing them. And social media makes the situation even more fucked up now because it's not completely one-sided anymore. You send a DM to the creator and they might reply. You comment and they might give you a heart. You ask something during a live stream and they answer your question personally. Maybe one day they recognize your username and say, oh yeah, we know this person. They have been commenting for years. And you're sitting there thinking, oh my god, they know me? And suddenly it feels like an actual relationship is there. Technically, the relationship is very one-sided, but emotionally, it can start to feel like there is some level of intimacy and interaction. And even without realizing it, आप अपने मन में एक कहानी बना लेते हो. Like, they are a family, they are happy, they have built this life together. And then suddenly, you discover that they are separating. And you're shocked, you are sad, you don't want to see them apart. And I think sometimes people don't realize why they are reacting so strongly. It's not necessarily because they are obsessed. It's because this couple has become a part of their routine. You've watched them for years, you watched their relationship grow, you watched their family grow, and somewhere along the way you became emotionally invested in the story you were watching. So when that story suddenly changes, it's natural to want to understand what happened. And I think that is where things start to get a little weird, because instead of simply thinking the situation is really sad and I hope both of them are okay, people start trying to put the pieces together. You will see a lot of comments like, do you remember that fight from 2022? Maybe that was the reason. Didn't you notice the way he looked at her in that vlog? Maybe she cheated on him. Maybe he did something wrong. And suddenly, we are not just reacting to someone's separation anymore. We are trying to solve it. Like there is some conspiracy theory or some missing piece of information that if we just analyze enough of the old videos or pictures, we will figure out what went wrong. And I'm sorry, but we will never know. We're basically writing fan fiction about somebody else's marriage. And I think sometimes the most responsible thing you can say is, I genuinely hope they both are okay, but I have absolutely no idea what happened inside that relationship and I'm okay with it. That's it, because we are just watching it. They are the ones living it. And I think this is an important thing to keep in mind, especially because this isn't just something that happens online. We see a very similar mindset in our own culture, particularly when children are involved. If you have grown up in an Indian or a Pakistani family, you've probably heard some version of, you have to stay together for the kids. Every marriage has problems. थोड़ा adjust करना पड़ता है, marriage में sacrifices तो करने ही पड़ते हैं. And honestly, there is some truth in that. If two people have a healthy relationship, staying together can obviously be very good for a child. There can be emotional stability, a financial stability. Both the parents are present for birthdays, school events, doctor appointments, holidays. And if parents genuinely respect and love each other, The child gets to see two people build a life together. And of course, that's so precious. So I don't think the idea of staying together for children came from nowhere. It makes sense. The problem is when we turn this into a universal rule. When we start to say parents together are good and parents separated are bad. Because that's not how a child experiences a family. A child does not walk into the house thinking, okay, my parents are legally married, so everything is fine. They experience the atmosphere. They notice how their parents speak to each other. They notice whether there is affection, there is tension. They notice whether people actually like each other. And I think sometimes we romanticize endurance in South Asian families. I'm pretty sure you must have heard, उनके husband बहुत difficult थे, but उन्होंने पूरी जिंदगी रिश्ता निभाया. And everyone goes, wow, what a strong woman. Or someone would say, he stayed for 30 years. कितने sacrifices किए. And maybe that person really was strong. Maybe they really did sacrifice a lot. But sometimes I just want to ask, how did those 30 years actually feel? Was this person happy? Did they feel respected? And did their children see love? Or did they just see two people fulfilling an obligation? Because sometimes we confuse a lasting relationship with a healthy relationship. A marriage can last 40 years and still be deeply unhappy. And another marriage can last 5 years, end respectfully, and leave two people in a much healthier place. And there is another thing I find really interesting. Sometimes parents will say, I stayed for my children. And I'm sure many parents genuinely mean that. But sometimes this sentence can also become a way of turning the sacrifice into something that a child is supposed to appreciate. मैंने तुम्हारे लिए इतने साल बर्बाद किए. I gave up everything for you. I could have left, but I stayed because of you. And now this child grows up feeling like my parents sacrificed their happiness for me. And that is a very heavy burden to put on a child. Because the child did not ask you to do that. And that is why I don't think we should only ask, are the parents still together? We should ask what kind of home this child is actually growing up in. Because here is where I think the argument, as long as the parents stay together, the child will be okay, really starts to fall apart. We need to understand that children don't just experience the fact that their parents are together. They experience the relationship happening in front of them. And sometimes these relationships are basically a battlefield with a marriage certificate attached to it. And I know that sounds really harsh, but think about it. They see constant criticism, shouting, insults, silent treatment, passive-aggressive behavior, emotional withdrawal, and sometimes something much quieter. Because when we imagine an unhealthy or toxic household, we often imagine a home where everyone is constantly fighting, everyone is constantly shouting. But sometimes toxicity looks incredibly quiet. Two people who have become completely indifferent to each other. They barely speak. They sleep in separate rooms. They don't laugh together. They don't touch each other. But in front of everyone else, they smile for the family photograph. They keep up with appearances at events or celebrations. And the child is seeing all of this. And then some parents say, हम बच्चों के सामने नहीं लड़ते. Okay, that's good. But children don't need to hear you scream to know that something is wrong. They notice the silence too. They notice when mom is upset. They notice when dad is angry. They notice when their parents don't seem to like each other anymore. And sometimes the child slowly becomes the bridge between two adults. बेटा पापा को बोलना खाना लग गया, मम्मी को पूछना वो कब रेडी होगी. And obviously doing this once or twice does not mean there is a huge problem. I'm talking about a situation where this becomes the entire dynamic. Two adults have stopped communicating with each other and the child is constantly caught in the middle. And then the child starts to become the messenger. Sometimes they become the mediator. Sometimes they even become a therapist, and that is a responsibility a child should never have. Your child is not supposed to fix your marriage. They're not supposed to decide who is right, who is wrong. They're not supposed to carry messages between two adults. And they definitely should not feel, if I love dad, I'm hurting mom. If I spend time with mom, dad will be upset. That is a horrible position to put a child in. And this is why I think the question, are both parents under the same roof, is not enough. Because sometimes staying together does create stability. But sometimes staying together creates years of tension. Sometimes separation creates temporary instability, but eventually gives everyone healthier environment. But sometimes separation itself can become incredibly messy and traumatic. So again, there is no universal answer. But I think there is one question worth asking. What is this child actually experiencing? Not log kya kahenge, or people will think I broke the family. We need to ask, what is the child actually experiencing? And this is where I think the conversation gets really interesting, because when we talk about children and divorces, we often focus on what the child is going to lose. They might have to move between two homes. They will have a disruptive routine. They might see one parent less often. They might have to adjust to a completely different family dynamic. And I know things can be very difficult. But I think sometimes we forget to ask another question. What is the child learning from the relationship they are watching right now? A child is not just experiencing the relationship, they are learning from it. You don't have to sit your child down and say, This is what marriage is. They watch you. They watch how you communicate, how you argue, how you apologize, what you tolerate in relationships and what you forgive, how you show affection, how you treat each other when you're angry. And eventually, those things can become their definition of what a relationship is supposed to be like. Imagine a child grows up watching a parent cheat. The other parent finds out, but they choose to stay together. And nobody really talks about it. Everyone pretends everything is fine. That child might grow up thinking, okay, I guess cheating is something that happens in marriages. Or maybe they see two parents who never talk about their feelings. They don't hug each other. They don't tell each other things. They function like roommates. That child might grow up thinking, maybe this is what marriage becomes after a few years. Marriages are too boring. Or they see one person constantly giving everything up for the other parent. And they learn marriage means losing yourself, losing your identity. And then when these kids grow up, they can go into two completely different directions. Some people look at their childhood and say, whatever happened in my house, I'm not going to repeat that. Nope, never happening. They try to break those patterns. They learn to communicate better. They may even seek therapy. And eventually they experience healthier relationships. But some people don't recognize this pattern because to them, this is normal. They say, मेरे घर में भी तो ऐसा ही होता था. And this is where things get complicated. Because one person thinks giving someone the silent treatment for 2 days is normal. And the other thinks it's completely unacceptable. One person thinks shouting during arguments or abusing during arguments is just how couples fight. And the other sees this as completely disrespectful. And neither of the partners woke up and decided, I'm going to have an unhealthy relationship. They may have simply grown up with completely different ideas of what normal relationships look like. And sometimes this goes even further. Some people grow up watching their parents lose themselves in marriages and they eventually think people fall in love. They get married, they stop loving each other, and then they become unhappy. So what's the point? Why get married at all? And I think this is something that we don't talk about enough. Children don't just inherit our genetics, they inherit our ideas about love and relationships. And in South Asian culture, we have so many phrases such as adjust करना पड़ता है, थोड़ा बहुत तो चलता है, everybody has problems, वक्त के साथ सब ठीक हो जाएगा. And sometimes these things are genuinely useful. Yes, you need to adjust sometimes. You need to compromise. And yes, you should not throw away a relationship because you had one bad week. But there is a point where adjustment becomes another word for tolerating something that should not be happening. And that is why I think the better question is not, will my child be happier if I divorce? Because honestly, who the hell can guarantee that? The better question is, what am I teaching my child about relationships through the way I am living mine? Because whether you stay or you leave, your child is always watching you. And after saying all of this, I want to make one thing very clear. I don't endorse separation or divorces. I don't think every difficult relationship needs to end. In fact, I'll say something that might be an unpopular opinion. I think some people give up on relationships too quickly. We have become so used to seeing relationship advice online that sometimes it feels like there is a label for everything. Your partner asks you where you are going. They say it is a control tactic. Your partner wants some alone time or wants some space. They will say he or she is being emotionally unavailable. You have an argument. People will label it as a toxic relationship. You disagree about something, they will call it a red flag. Someone on TikTok tells you, if he really loved you, he would never make you feel that way. And then another person tells you, if she asks where you are, she is controlling you. She's trying to isolate you from family and friends. And eventually you are just sitting there thinking, okay, but what exactly are we supposed to do? How do we fix things? Because relationships are messy. People have bad days. They get irritated. They misunderstand each other. Sometimes you are exhausted. Sometimes your partner is stressed about money. Sometimes you haven't had a proper date night in 6 months because you have a toddler screaming in the background and you still have to do the dishes and there is laundry sitting on the floor. That does not mean this relationship is toxic. Sometimes two people are not toxic. They are just bad at communicating. Sometimes the relationship is not broken. You just have not learned how to be in a relationship yet. And I think this is where effort matters. If there is still love, if there is respect, if both people are willing to take accountability and both want to make things better, then I think the relationship deserves some effort. Talk about it. Try counseling. Go to therapy. Sometimes you need someone outside the relationship to point out patterns that you can't see yourself. Take some space if you need it. Learn how to communicate without immediately becoming defensive. Learn how to apologize. Learn how to actually listen. Because marriage is difficult. Of course it is. You are putting two completely different people together and asking them to build an entire life. But there is also a point where work on the relationship stops being good advice. Because there is a massive difference between we are struggling to communicate and I am afraid of my partner. There is a difference between we argue sometimes and I am being constantly humiliated. There is a difference between my partner gets possessive sometime and my partner controls who I see, where I go, what I wear, and who am I allowed to talk to. There is a difference between conflict and abuse, between a difficult relationship and a dangerous relationship. And if there is emotional abuse, verbal abuse, if there is any coercive control, if there is any manipulation, if there are threats and violence, that is not a marriage. Your safety comes first, especially when children are involved. Because if a child is growing up watching one parent live in fear of the other, keeping the family together cannot be your goal. And I think this is where we need some nuance. Sometimes people leave too quickly, and sometimes people stay far too long. Sometimes relationships need work, sometimes they need professional help, sometimes they need space, and sometimes it does need to end. And the difficult part is, none of us watching from the outside can have enough information to make that decision for someone else. Which brings me back to where this video started. Those comments telling strangers, stay together for the child, we don't fucking know. Maybe they are trying to save their marriage. Maybe they have tried for months. Maybe they are happier apart. Maybe they are miserable together. Maybe something happened that we will never know. We don't know. And honestly, we don't need to. Let's say the couple we have been talking about actually reaches that point. They've tried talking. They've tried working things out. Maybe they've gone to couples counseling. Maybe they have given the relationship multiple chances. And eventually they both realize this relationship is not working out, so they separate. And I think this is where I don't see enough people talking about what happens next. Because we spend so much time discussing why is the divorce happening, why are they separating, what will happen to the kids. But we don't talk enough about how the parents behave after the divorce. How are these two people going to behave now? Because they are not husband and wife anymore. They are not romantic partners anymore. But they are still parents. And sometimes two adults can end their marriage and then continue the same war through their child. Imagine being 80-year-old and hearing one parent tell you everything the other parent did wrong. They say things like, your father does not care about you, or your mother has always been the problem. Your mother did this, or ask your dad why hasn't he called. And then you go to the other parent's house and you hear a completely different version of the story. And you're sitting there thinking, but I love you both. What am I supposed to do with all this? You can't process an adult relationship when you're 8. And honestly, you should not have to. If two adults have a disagreement, they need to deal with it. Why is the child involved in this? And I don't even think parents do this because they are trying to manipulate their children. Sometimes they are just hurt. So they start explaining what happened. They start telling the child their side of story. And I understand why you would want to do that, because imagine your child looking at you thinking, why did you do this? Obviously, you want them to understand you didn't just randomly destroy the whole family or the relationship. But the problem is, your child does not necessarily have the emotional capacity to understand all of this. An 8-year-old does not know how to process years of resentment between two adults. They don't understand complicated emotions. They don't understand financial issues, infidelity, incompatibility, or family pressures. You can explain all of this to them, but that does not mean they are equipped to process all of this. And sometimes I think parents forget that because they're trying to make sure their child knows, I wasn't the bad guy. But your child does not actually need to decide who the bad guy was. And sometimes this goes even further. You might tell your child all of these things because you want some reassurance yourself. You want them to say, Mom, I understand why you left, or Dad, I think you made the right decision. But that is not your child's job. You decided to end the marriage. Your child does not have to decide whether you were right or wrong, because while you were trying to explain why the marriage ended, your child might be sitting there thinking, was this because of me? Did I do something wrong? And that is why I think some of the most important things you can tell them is simply, this was a decision between two adults, and you don't have to choose between us, and we both still love you. And that's it. And obviously, the child is going to have their own reaction to the divorce. Maybe they are angry, maybe they are sad, maybe they miss having everyone in the same house. They might be very confused, or maybe they are actually relieved because the tension at the home is finally gone. Maybe they seem completely fine initially, and then 6 months later, suddenly they are struggling. All of that can happen, and I think we need to be okay with it, because sometimes we make this mistake where we think, my child is sad after the divorce, therefore the divorce was a mistake. Not necessarily. Of course they are sad, their life changed. But that does not automatically mean the situation before the divorce was healthier. And the opposite can be true as well. If a child seems perfectly fine, that does not mean, okay, the divorce did not affect them. Of course it affected them. Their family structure has changed. The point is not to pretend the separation is painless. It is to avoid making an already painful situation even worse. And that is where I think parents have some control. You cannot necessarily control the fact that your marriage ended, but you can control whether you badmouth your ex in front of them. You can control whether you ask them to take sides. You can control whether you make them feel responsible for your emotions. And if they are struggling, you can get them help too. Your child can talk to a professional or a child psychologist. You can find a place where they can say, I'm angry, or I miss mom, or I miss my dad. I don't know how to feel about this. Because ultimately, your relationship with your ex has ended. Your children's relationship with their parent has not. You don't have to like your ex. You don't have to be friends with them. You don't even have to have a particularly warm relationship with them. You can have boundaries. You can keep your distance. But you can still be good co-parents. Because ending a marriage does not mean you need to end the family too. A family can change without being destroyed. And maybe one of the healthier things a child can learn is that sometimes relationships don't work. Sometimes people grow apart. And sometimes you have to leave. But leaving does not mean you have to destroy each other. You can end a relationship without making your child carry the weight of it. Anyway, that's it for the video, guys. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And honestly, if you disagree with me, tell me why. I'd love to hear your perspective. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And I'll see you guys in the next one.